Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Looks like another full house for the second of our two COVID coronavirus update webinars with customers, extended supply chains and good friends, talking about what's happening at the coalface in terms of collections, what's happening at the HWRCs, what is an essential service, when can we implement critical change, and how do we manage the messaging to our customers. They're all themes that we picked up yesterday. We've got a new panel, apart from Trevor, and we've got some new delegates. So hopefully we'll have some new debate, but we'll reflect on some of the conversations we had yesterday. And Ian and I will no doubt share some updates from a call we had with DEFRA just this morning. So welcome. COVID-19, it is absolutely taken over all of our lives. You know, I won't ask everybody on the panel to tell us how they're getting on with homeschooling. It may not be appropriate to some, but certainly in my case, I've never juggled so many electronic devices at once, trying to get the 3 times table, the 6 times table, and the English comprehension working whilst I'm running webinars with customers and clients. So it's really an interesting time. But hopefully we got some insight from people that are really doing good things, are inside the circle of knowledge. Can give us updates on things that may be coming next week in terms of guidance and updates. So plenty to talk about. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hand the floor over to each of my experts, my good friends, and ask them to talk about life from their perspective. So we've got Christy Spindler from South Gloucester, who's one of our customers. We've got Ian Fielding from Adept, looking at that wider local authority landscape as well as his own authority, I'm sure. And then we've got Trevor Nicol from the Joint Cambridgeshire Authorities, who also is representing the CIWM. So we've got everybody here because I'll be chipping in with my ESA/Suez perspective. So hopefully plenty for us to debate in the next 45 minutes. My one plea to those of you that are dialed in, and that number is growing, I can see it in the corner, don't be shy in putting your questions in. There's a nice little questions box. Just chip away at that, ping them over, and we'll make sure that we get them asked. But we have had several sent in when you were registering. So here we are, as a document here. I've got a load of questions that I can ask as well. So, but ideally, let's take the live ones rather than the pre-prepared ones. This isn't question time, is it? So first up, Christy, as my customer, what have you been doing in South Gloucester? How's this affecting you, and what does the future hold?
Hi everyone. So in South Gloucestershire, we saw quite a rapid reduction in our staffing levels, mostly due to isolation and those that had gone off with chronic health conditions. So across the services that I look after, we were down to about 65% staff within the first week. And so we took quite drastic action, and we've actually gone live already with a number of service changes. So like most people, all our HWRCs are shut. We've suspended our garden waste. We've stopped our bulky waste collections. But we've also, from this week, reduced our food and recycling from weekly to fortnightly, and have actually gone out on a partially commingled service rather than a curbside sort service. And so that we've actually just decided that we were going to go with one suite of changes all in one go. It's brought a number of challenges, particularly around communication, how you get a message out to that many people that quickly. And also internally was quite a challenge in terms of our own governance. Our corporate colleagues aren't necessarily used to making such prompt online operational decisions, so that was quite challenging as well. We're finding social distancing continuing to be an issue, and we're also getting quite a lot of pushback on the PAT guidance on storing waste for 72 hours, that it doesn't apply to recycling. How do we know that it's been stored for 72 hours? And I personally feel that that's been driven by what they're thinking about the residents and not the staff that have got to then go and pick that material up. So PPE and social distancing are things that we're still continuing to work through.
Thanks, Christy. So that's a bit of a big bang. You've kind of taken quite an extreme perspective, perhaps, compared to some authorities. How are the public reacting?
I would say about 80% of people are really supportive, even those that have got garden waste collection. So we're not offering any refunds, and we've not confirmed whether we'll be doing extensions yet. And actually, I would say 80% are really, really good. There's about a 10% that are really unhappy, and it's trying to nip those in the bud as early as you can. But we're also seeing quite a lot of people coming back and supporting us, and actually arguing back in our support, which is also quite good to sometimes let run, especially on social media.
I'm going to come back to social media in a minute, because I think it's a great tool for sharing good news stories, but it's a terrible tool for those bad stories, isn't it? I mean, some of the things going around at the moment that aren't advice are just quite worrying. So let's move over to Trevor. Trevor, you're operational, but you've also got a CIWM hat on, thinking about the sector in its broader sense. What have you been doing? What are you thinking about doing? And what are you hearing from the membership within CIWM?
Okay, so we went quite big. So I have a shared service between Cambridge City and South Cambs District Council, so two councils, two lots of politics, but adds to the doing anything, any changes. But we went last week, we suspended our garden waste service, and we gave people that it would be suspended for at least 6 weeks, and we told people what to expect. And we've now been working on reducing moving to driver plus one. We did that from Monday, so every vehicle is driver plus one. We've been looking to back out there. We've reduced our bulkies as well, so we've done quite a lot of changes quite quickly as well. We've tried to document that everything to our staff, so why we've done some things and not done others. So that's been quite difficult, and it's also been trying to ensure that we've taken 2 sets of members across, and we could leave politics at the door. This is about what's right for our staff, firstly, and what's right for our residents. I think the sooner we got that message out, we're seeing lots of support on social media. We saying we lost about 30% of our staff. We're actually seeing some of those come back now. They've been self-isolating, but we'll see where those numbers might grow again. But we're seeing that social media, we're seeing the stickers on bins, all of those kind of things are coming in. So we're getting the support out there, and we're allowing social media to fight itself. And actually the good side is winning at the moment. So watching some of our own, we've got lots of residents who are pushing other people down, who are saying, why aren't we collecting? Why should I? I'm at home, I can see the bin men. They haven't collected my garden waste bin because I'm self-isolating or I'm working from home. Why are the bin men not working? So we're allowing sensible people to answer those at the moment. What we're seeing a bit wider in the industry is the move of public and private sector talking. So I've been on a call this morning with one of the private sector companies offering support. They putting staff into furlough. We're having those conversations. We're at the moment, we don't need it with our suspension of service, but as that changes, I think we will, to get us back into whatever the new norm is next week or next month. So I think the days of private and public sector being completely different, I think we just need to work together and get the right thing for our residents out there. So it's been an interesting and changing process over the last couple of weeks.
Thanks, Trevor. I know that there's a few people that have been involved in this kind of matchmaking brokerage approach to, both businesses that are working in the commercial industrial space who may have spare capacity because their feedstocks are dropping off, and local authorities who may have particularly high illness rates at the moment or concerns. So that's a great opportunity to, and I know CIWM are heavily involved in that as well, Trevor, which is great. But let's use that to link into Ian quickly, because Adept have also been involved in some of those discussions, haven't they? And you've been doing a bit of a survey about what's going on in the sector. So first and foremost, what are you doing locally? But then share some of that wider thinking, perhaps.
Okay, yeah, happy to. So as you've explained, I've got 2 roles here. One is I'm representing North Yorkshire County Council. We're a 2-tier area, so that creates its own particular issues. And I have to say that I think one thing COVID-19 has done very well is to sort of harmonise the industry, reduce or remove, frankly, a lot of the barriers that have been there, whether it's public and private sector, whether it's upper tier, lower tier, whatever it is. We're all in this together, and we're all doing a great job, I think, of pulling together and seeing how to get this to work. In terms of just some general reflections, I think what's sort of surprised probably us all, certainly me, was just the speed of change, how quickly things changed in the first week or 2. I think things are not moving maybe as quickly as we might have hoped on some other areas, particularly, and I'm sure we'll come on to this in terms of guidance, but the speed of change in terms of our reaction on the coal face had to be quick. So I think it highlighted the value of our sort of business continuity plans and things that we all had in place. They've not all been appropriate, but I think that I can now see the value of having done them over the past number of years, and I thought, really, is this something we want to be spending our time on? But yes, it certainly is. The value of tech is brilliant. I think as an authority that's recently gone through the whole change of our tech, I'm so grateful we have, because we couldn't function without it. I think we've seen some good responses so far from DEFRA, from industry, from the sector bodies, from all the network groups, trying to get these common issues out. And thanks to Suez for doing this sort of event, which is really helpful to make sure we're all aware of what's going on. And we are driving out and identifying what those sort of common pictures are, common issues are, and hopefully helping to bring them to a conclusion. I'm mindful, though, we're probably still very much at the early days. Staff resources are likely to get more depleted, so we're all challenged with how we're going to respond to that. And I think we all anticipate further reductions and disruption in service delivery. And ongoing pressures. I'm really interested to know where we're going. I'm sure we'll come on to this in terms of our approach to HWRCs. We've virtually all closed them for very good reason, but we need to understand what we're going to do with them and how we're going to respond to the pressures that are coming, anecdotal evidence around fly tipping and litter, etc. I'm worried, frankly, about supply chain resilience. I'm worried about the ability to keep running, particularly waste treatment plant and access to spares and services, and therefore what contingencies we've got in place around landfill. But I think I'll pause at that point. You asked me to just cover some of the stuff we're doing in the debt. Thanks to everyone, hopefully everyone is aware of, and thanks to everyone that has completed the survey we sent out on behalf of the debt, Nordo, LARAC and the LGA. It was a request from DEFRA, and as it closed at 12:30, I haven't seen the final result, but just beforehand we were up to nearly 200, well, I think it's over 200 authorities, so that's absolutely fantastic. What I can tell you is it's telling us some of what we perhaps thought, which is good to have those messages confirmed. We know HWRCs are pretty well all closed. What's good to know is that residual waste collections continue pretty much unaffected. What was really encouraging to see is the recycling collections across the country have only minimal disruption or are operating normally. And we've got other messages in there which we'll communicate through a press release hopefully tomorrow, so everyone will become aware of what that's saying. But thanks to everyone that's provided information to that. Thank you.
Fabulous update. Thank you, Ian. I'm going to completely switch today's agenda around, so apologies to my panel, but I'm going to react to you and what you've been saying, so that's my prerogative as chairman. You've talked about material flows, you've talked about recycling collections. I was on a call with Ian just a couple of hours ago with DEFRA, where collections of recycling across England have been really well maintained, which I think was a bit of a surprise to some people, when you consider that Scotland and Wales are struggling much more with keeping that material flow open. So the question that springs to mind, because Christie's already made that decision to restrict the frequency, and we've already got concerns about materials for recycling that potentially could be contaminated, 72 hours. Do we think there is going to be a problem with recycling collections and particularly MRF operations a week or two down the line? I mean, are we expecting that? Are we planning for that? I mean, Christy, you've gone early and big. Is that very much preventative? Are you expecting to be able to keep that service operational for the next month or two, let's say?
Yeah, so when we looked at our staffing levels and we looked at what we would need, we realised that actually we could go as low as 40% of staff and still be able to run the service. And so that was what our driver was. We've got quite a big in-house streetcar team as well of extra drivers and things. So we could really drop down the work level and we would still be able to complete. And that was one of the drivers to it. We actually already had plans to shut at least 2 of our HWRCs to clear out material space. So if we do get disruption in the supply chain, we've actually got quite a lot of space already cleared out, ready to store that material. And actually, when I'm thinking about opening up the HWRCs, I probably won't open all 4. I'll probably only open 2 of them. And I'm actually considering whether one becomes for garden and one becomes for black, and we restrict everything else, so that we have actually created that space to store that material in anticipation of potential disruption. I think what we wanted to do was sort of go with our minimum service as quickly as we could and get that in, because we think as an authority the challenges will become much bigger in the next couple of weeks, and quite frankly we didn't want to be worrying about waste when we may have much bigger social care issues to worry about in 4 weeks' time.
Thank you. And Trevor, well, MRFs, materials? How are you feeling about this one?
So it is concerning. Some of it is even them getting the right PPE for them to carry on operating, as well as spares. So I suppose in one way that's why we suspended our garden waste first, while the MRFs were still operating. If we have to flip those services in a month's time, we could bring our green back up and put our dry recycling back down again if we need to. So I think it is just about trying to be supportive in there. The message is about trying to get people not to produce the material, hold on to it. So I think there is a concern, but I think it is just this moving feast. It is making sure we can get that material moving through. And I think that's where, as the bigger industry, we need to work out about who's got capacity, where can they store. And I think the issue of opening up too many CA sites will be about that capacity, about storage, unless we are very open with our planning and EA about saying, well, actually, we're going to designate other locations, buildings where we can store dry recycle it in the short term, but we're not getting that guidance either. So I think there is a concern about what will happen to and we run a MBT, so there's the same. They spend a lot of time being broken down, just being because it's an MBT, so they need very much care and parts. So yeah, we see that we may end up having a lot of our material going straight to landfill, what's not ideal.
So there's two things that jump out there. One's staffing, sharing resources, identifying through the brokerage system, perhaps how we keep the number of staff we need to run whatever service provision you've decided. I think so. That's a big message we can give back to government. That brokerage scheme has had a week to gestate and has gone nowhere. So come on, guys, we've got to do more. But the second point there I thought was interesting was about messaging, because Trevor talks about switching, potentially green on and recyclables off. And I'm wondering, Ian, and I'll come back to the other two in a moment, but how do we message that? Because we've taken 25 years to get the public to get recycling right, and they still don't do that very often. And then we're going to go, oh, something off, something on. I mean, my grand's, she's hard work, I tell you. I'm not sure. Thankfully, she doesn't live in Trevor's authority or yours, Ian, so you're okay. But how are we going to get this messaging right? I mean, Rap said earlier that they were looking at some new consolidated messaging for local government around Recycle Now and COVID. Is that all we need?
It's a really good question, isn't it? I mean, we know the reality of developing common communication messages, even in a sub-regional area or a two-tier area like mine. It's not easy to do that at the national level. It's going to be extremely difficult. But frankly, I think there's a need for it. I do think there's a need for some better communications and better messages about what people should be doing to prevent the production of waste in the first place. We need to stop cutting hedges. We need to stop demolishing sheds, whatever it is. But I think it's this difficulty in determining how to manage the message on what the priorities are, and that's something I know RAP is working with DEFRA on. I'm intrigued to know how they're going to land this. What is it? Is it going to be you should do it this way, every authority? Because if it isn't, I'm not really sure I understand the value of it. So I'm intrigued.
We had this debate a week ago with DEFRA, didn't we, about a RAP started priority list of services, and yeah. We know the ESA members have fed back. We know that local government members have fed back, and there's quite a bit of distance between some of our opinions about when is a food waste service a priority, and if it's not a priority, is it in your residual bin? And when does your garden get switched off? And is that before recycling or after recycling? I think you're right, Ian. Unless government says this is the order and you will obey, I think it just creates as much uncertainty as we've got currently about when is a service appropriate or not.
And I think they need to recognise that local authorities, again, it came up this morning, but local authorities make decisions for good reasons and the right decisions at the right time, usually for the right reasons. And they need to perhaps to understand that and respect it a little bit. Because I think there's a perception, possibly, that some of the decisions we've made have been the wrong decisions.
I'm going to dig some more. You've opened a can of worms, Ian.
I think it's HWRCs, and the point is, nobody's closed an HWRC. It was an easy thing to do, and nobody's closed an HWRC because they wanted to do it all along, and this was the excuse. We've done it for very good reason. we know there is some pressure there and the desire to perhaps offer some kind of service, which we're going to have to work through with DEFRA over the next week or so, to try and understand what is practical, what's realistic, if anything, given that we've already mentioned on this call that HWRCs in many cases are part of contingency plans. So if things go horribly wrong, we need to be able to rely on that element of the infrastructure to provide some backup services.
Okay, let's talk HWRCs. You've all alluded to it already. You know, Christy's already thinking about opening 2. You know, we heard it here first. Yeah, Ian, I'm with you on this one. You know, we closed them for a very good reason. We thought very long and hard about what we should and shouldn't do. We worked with our clients on this. I'm concerned, and I know CIWM yesterday, Trevor, didn't they, late last night, issued a statement to give DEFRA a bit of a kick in the ribs to say, come on, you know, we need some guidance on this, and we need to move forward on this in a collaborative way. So let's do HWRCs for the next 5 or 6 minutes, because people on the call, they're already, you know, they're pinging in questions around when do you open them, how do you decide, what's the protocol. So let's start with that. At the moment, all our sites are closed, pretty much. Everybody on this call, for very good reason, social distancing being the first one, non-essential travel being the second one, and the risk of needing a lot of policemen potentially around the gates should things kick off in a bank holiday style weekend. So we know why they're closed. So the question is, under what circumstances do we think they should be opened? Christy, you're already thinking about it.
Yeah, so for us, until the non-essential travel ban is lifted, then it's a flat they stay closed, because that it just wouldn't be compliant to do that. If the 2 metre social rule stays in place and the non-essential travel is lifted, then I think we'll look to open 1 or 2, but we'll restrict the stream of them, so they'll be just for garden or just for residual. And the rationale being that actually if the bays are all the same, then people can park, and the bit that we were getting problems with before was the crisscrossing of members of the public. Yeah, and we'll have to put some quite strict restrictions on how we control the numbers. And I think it would also be around actually hoping that the public would be sensible, because actually if we do get into that situation where we are totally swamped, then we'll have to immediately close them. So I think there'll be some messaging as well that we'll need to put around that. Also already starting to talk with staff around actually you're not open at the moment, you are able to leave early unless you've been redeployed. Actually, the flip side of that is when we do get open, I think we'll try and be open for the whole of the daylight hours to give us that longer time, and almost asking staff now to appreciate what they've got now to help us when we get to that position in the future. We're also looking at what options we've got for putting rows or skips out in key areas, particularly some of the high density areas. And we're sort of just starting to form what some of those plans might look like. But again, while the non-essential travel ban is in, then those options aren't one we can consider.
That's very clear. Thanks, Christy. I quite like your forward thinking's very good, by the way. I'm enjoying how you're seeing the world, you know, 6 weeks, 8 weeks from now. It's fantastic. So go on in, Trevor. What's your thinking about what we could do in terms of guidance around HWRCs, and what kind of steps might we need to go through to judge whether they should or shouldn't be opened?
I think the social distancing and the guidance on non-essential travel is just that's a nice easy one. We shouldn't be doing those. We also should be considering the time of year. So we know that if we open them up on a Good Friday and open them over the Easter weekend, we're just letting ourselves fail. So there is about this message about let's give ourselves some time to see where we go. So now they're closed, people will get used to that. And I think we shouldn't be stepping them up quickly, because if we start them up and then we close them down again, that's going to be difficult. So I think we have to keep that consistency for a while of they are closed, don't clear out your garages. That's the message we need to do, is hold on to that material. We do need to think about when we do open again. There's so many now that are on 5-day working or short day working that probably do need to make sure they're up and running full time. So yeah, sort of that 12 hours a day, daylight hours, how you get that message out there. I'm really nervous of, and probably the wrong wording at this time, but bring out your dead skips out in the community, because we already do community events, and sometimes it is just fighting out that we might as well just put a skip on one person's drive and let them empty their house out. So I think we really need to be careful about how we do those kind of things, because people some people, and a very small number, will take advantage of that. So I think it is about how do we set those up, and I much prefer that we get a decent residual collection or take additional side waste when we try setting back up again, rather than a free-for-all. Because if not, it will be Mrs. Miggins, who lives on her own, who's struggling, who will be at the bottom of the queue. And as local authorities, most of the things we're looking at is about looking after the vulnerable. So whilst all my areas of responsibility have nothing to do with vulnerable people per se, I've sat on a lot of meetings talk about how do we support vulnerable people, how do we get communication groups up. Over the last week, I've learned a hell of a lot about things I never thought I would do as a senior officer. So I think we just need to be careful. We do need to hold our ground with DEFRA a bit about why we've done it. And yes, we do need to get them up and running, but it needs to be in a coordinated approach at the right time. We've already had the concern this week about more people travelling. Whether that was a one-off blip day, bad measurements, who knows? But if we start doing this, there'll be nothing better than a day out at the tip. It's linear. So there's only two great things: a day out at the beach and a day out at the tip, isn't there? So, you know, we will have half our community coming to visit us, which we don't want, for lots of reasons. So I think we just need to push back. I do like the idea that if we are going to open them up, we open them up for single streams of materials in the very short time. So it is clear, it is quick. I think that would be really some good guidance and a good policy if we're going to have that done. But I think we just need to hold our nerve. We need to work very closely with DEFRA and be supportive with them, but we shouldn't just open these up because the consequences could be great.
So Ian, you and I are the two representatives on this call that sit with DEFRA on a weekly basis to debate these things. How are you seeing that? Do you think DEFRA are going to be open to hold fire? There's, you know, not now, sometime in the future, strategic sites, single materials?
I think that's our job to get them to try and understand that. There's a couple of things I think in relation to what we just heard. Everything I like. I'm going to take a lot of this away from my own area. I think it's good stuff. Two supposed things. One, I'm slightly concerned we need to work through, if we are going to open them up for a single stream, how we control that, because we'll get a lot of people that don't understand it. But I think that sentiment is absolutely right. And the other point, of course, is that all the time they're closed, we've got a lot of staff resource which we can redeploy on the other essential services. I mean, that's got to be part of the consideration. But yeah, how do we feed this back into DEFRA? We give them all these messages. I know they're under a lot of pressure and they've got a lot of concern, haven't they, around the material supply chain. We came up this morning as part of the call about the lack of facilities for disposal of now with the HWRCs being closed and the impact that's having on the industry, which is a consideration I'm sure DEFRA wants to take into account. But I think we need to just hold firm. Very good reasons at the moment, particularly around social distancing and unnecessary journeys, why I don't think makes sense in all but exceptional circumstances. And I think that's reflected in the WISH guidance, or the draft WISH guidance as well.
And I'm presuming everybody in the call has seen the WISH guidance, and you know, we've probably all fed back through one channel or another. I know Trevor and I were on late night phone calls with CIWM last week trying to get our thoughts aligned. Do we think they're a useful step in the right direction? Do they close some of the gaps, Ian?
I think the answer is yes. They're going to be helpful. They need to be finished. We need to get them out there. But there's still a lot of concerns, and I'm going to leave that to my colleagues or the coal face on this. But the making it work in practice, particularly on constraints of being able to access PPE, is the challenge, and getting it to work. So the guidance is great, but can we make it work? I think is the question.
Trevor?
Yeah, I think so. We've taken our wish and put it into 2 or 4 sides about what we're doing, why we're doing it, why we're not doing it in places. And I think the wish guidance, draft wish guidance, because it just needs to be published, but I don't think anybody really cares now, because what's out there is what's out there. Is really good. It was really easy to read, easy to adopt. It did change what I did this weekend, because that coming out Friday meant we changed our service over the weekend. So with 2 calls with my 2 chief execs and the leaders of the council to say we're just going to turn our service upside down slightly. are you all right with that? But we got it done and got staff in to make that change on the Monday morning. So I think the guidance is there. My concern is about where things move to. So even on the news this morning, the World Health Organization may be changing guidance around masks. But it's fine to say that we all need to wear masks all the time. But I can't buy a mask. Well, I can buy a mask. They've just gone up. They've gone up tenfold in price, and you can hardly get them. So my view is there's some manufacturers out there profiteering, and I'll be that blunt about it. But something I could buy a little while ago at 50p, now charging over £5 for a basically a basic mask, I think is wrong. So the view should be is if government's going to do this, they need to take control of that stock and actually issue it out. So I know locally we've set up a subgroup in our resilience forum about PPE into the right places and why. But there is that difficulty. We can't just allow the market to run this. Who pays most will do it. But I think having that guidance, the wish stuff is really good. We just need to get that adopted now and allow us to run that out into our services. But we probably just need to pause a bit of time. We don't want new guidance every weekend. We just need to let some of this run. And we need to remember when we're talking of peak. So I know locally our peak is being pushed as the 15th or 16th of April. So that's what we're working towards till we get to that peak. It's different in different parts of the country. But actually it's only 2 weeks away, but we need to manage that through. And we don't want to keep changing what we're doing.
I think it's very, very, very sound advice, Trevor. I do worry that there's so much guidance that's coming, or as Ian and I found out earlier, there's so much more guidance that's due out from the agency about, things like storage, things like permit, relaxation. That's great, but the amount of time they're taking to get it out is not helping us now. And as you say, peak's on its way, and I do worry about staffing. When it really hits peak point, just how much of the services we've got can we keep open? What's your thoughts, Christy?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on something around the face masks as well. I'm actually really nervous about the suggestion that face masks might be brought in for the waste industry. I think the main risk of contamination for our crews is from their hands, and actually anything that gave them a need to put their hands near their faces would be a real concern for me. And actually we've been pushing back a lot to the members of the public that have been raising that issue with us. Actually our control measures are all around good hand hygiene and avoiding your face, and I think a mask would be going against that. So have a real concern on that. And I think what I would really want to see is some more guidance coming out on how people present their waste. So actually we talk around 72 hours, but only for waste that's contaminated, but yet they say it can stay on cardboard for 24 hours. And also how we make sure that that's actually been stored for 72 hours. And I think I'd like to see more coming through around what the role of the public is in helping this, as well as what we're doing within the industry, because I think there's an element there for the public having a sensible approach to what they put out and how they put it out.
I think that's really important, actually. And I've really enjoyed watching what some of the London councils have been issuing to all London residents for every channel available to them in terms of the responsibility of the public to play their part in order to keep frontline services operational. And I thought it was some very clear messaging that I've shared with my colleagues, which I think is great about doing your bit in terms of, bagging, storage, not cutting the lawn, not doing that DIY project, all the things we've kind of alluded to already. Clarity, and I'm hoping RAP might come out with some very good messages that we can use, from location to location. Yesterday's call, we had a number of authorities that wanted to share their strap lines for what their engagement was sounding like. Have any of you got some interesting strap lines you're using to get the public to play ball? Christy?
We've not got strap lines, but one of the things we have been doing, so we work across the region in the west of England with Bath and Bristol and North Somerset as well, and actually we've been halving the load by sharing the messages between us. And when someone is writing something, so we've done quite a lot around how to minimise garden waste, and we've shared that across the whole region and to try and reduce the workload. And actually one of the partners said yesterday, why don't we also see this as an opportunity for communication? People are really engaged in what's happening with waste because it's all changing and they're having to keep up up with it, that actually it's an opportunity for us to talk around putting your stuff out really well in your box, because actually that will help us get around quicker, and actually starting to see that engagement that we've got, which might be starting off negatively, and turning it around and hoping that we can continue the behaviours. Because although our food waste is actually going in our residual stream at the moment, we're actually still asking people to present it in the food bin because we don't want to lose that behaviour. So it's trying to work through some of that behaviour issues, but also the opportunity that we potentially got from the engagement at the moment.
So, Ian, have you been picking up this through the survey and your engagement with ADEPT members? This kind of, I love the idea that the West of England are sharing their comms and doing things together, but I don't think that's getting outside of the region, Christy. So what can we do, whether it's CIWM, Trevor, ADEPT, LARAC, who couldn't be on the call because they were occupied elsewhere, but they offered their apologies. How do we use our networks to make sure some really good information that's being developed can't be replicated at minimal effort or cost?
Really good challenge. I think, yeah, we need to get better at that, don't we? I think there is a lot of good communication. There's a lot of good information exchange within those networks already, to be fair, though. So I don't want to pretend it's not happening at all, because it is. We've already got those communication channels fairly well established. But as I said earlier, I think we need to get better at some of these more common messages and generic messages and sharing those out a little bit more. There's more I think we can do on the survey stuff. I'd be really interested. I don't want to extend the survey so they become burdensome for people to fill in, but I think there is a bit more intelligence we could perhaps try and gather around. I'm really interested in what's happening to residual waste and what are we seeing already. And I think there is some anecdotal evidence of seeing increases in residual waste from homes, perhaps balanced by reductions in commercial. So those that are collecting commercial waste, or may well have stopped doing that, or certainly have seen reduced tonnages. So what is that doing? How is that feeding down through the material flow, and how's that impacting on plant? Don't know. And those are some of the things I think we need to try and find out a little bit more. Just trying to understand how people are responding to that and what we can do to try and perhaps prepare. If parts of the country might not be seeing issues now, but if other parts that may be a little bit more advanced in the southeast possibly are dealing with issues, then we might need to reflect on that. I think, is that on the horizon for us maybe in the north? We're a little bit behind in terms of COVID. So I think there's a bit more we can do around that. But we need to be mindful. We don't want to say overly burden people with feeding into surveys or network groups all the time. We need a succinct way of capturing some of that information, I think.
I think it's interesting. I've been contacted, and Suez more broadly been contacted by the press, every day, multiple times, wanting some quote or insight. But what they really want is some evidence. They go, we want to run a headline, food waste is going bananas, etc., etc. Have you got some data? And we're like, we're week 1. There isn't any data. Then we're going, it's week 2. That's not really a trend. So I'm with you on this. I do think, if we assume that we're going to be in this world for another 3 months or so, it could be longer, or at least elements of this system are going to be still under tension for the next 3 months. We could start to collect some of that, and recognizing, peaks in residual, peaks in food. We'll start to see that, and I think then we can start to discuss, with some accuracy, messaging and behaviours that we may or may want to push. Because at the moment, you see it every day on the news channel. Somebody's making a quote about something happening, but they haven't got any data. They're just, we expect this to happen. That's not a headline. So I'm a bit worried about the press at the moment. Trevor, where are you on this? What's CIWM going to do?
Well, I think the survey at the moment is the ideal thing. So I think it was so quick and easy to fill in. I think most people will be quite happy to run that every week, of where you can see where the change is. Because I think it was asking it just, I filled it in and expecting another 20 pages to come up behind it. So it was like, oh, I've done that.
That was my PhD survey, Trevor. That wasn't. I
think that's really good, and I think that's really helpful on those changes, and that will be useful to be sharing that as an industry about where we're going. I think communication it is getting that sharing that information, and I think we are. So many of us, as Waste is such a small family, you tend to link into half a dozen different groups, and then you look at something on Facebook or Twitter, and you think that's a great idea. I'll pass that over to my comms team, and they just lift it and put your own badge on it. And I think that's happening a lot about really good ideas. So maybe okay, in the good old days of when RAP were really that local authority coordinator, we maybe need to then just to step that back up again, actually share those really, every time you do a good message, you send it into RAP, and then people can just take it out of the libraries. It's still there, but it's a bit passive at the moment. But I think RAP would be the better organized point of contact because they've already got these libraries, and we just need to share those out. And I think some of it is about sharing that. It's not about love, food, hate, waste messages. It is about some really blunt messages that could come out centrally about bins, about putting your, even if that's about put your bin out or have it filled up 72 hours beforehand and just don't put anything new in, so you are really clear. Because I think the message at the moment, oh yes, if you think there's something wrong, double bag it and put it out, but it's only on waste. What do you do with your recycling, especially if you're on a box collection? Where the clear message is put stuff in your bin or your box and don't put anything out 2 days before or 3 days before you're going to collect it, so you're always running that little bit behind. That would put probably some safety on our collections. But that's a nice easy message that we could put out. But I think it is just, we do need some of that general corporate messages, and we probably do need a repository of good messages, and be more than willing for people to even think about how we've done some of the messaging we've done. We've actually taken our branding off so people can just use it. So it doesn't really matter. Quite happy for somebody else to reuse that. And the other one we're using more and more is our residents. So the pictures on bins, the pictures of on windows about loving your bin man, we're allowing them to push that message out, at least appreciating that we're out there doing stuff. And on the back of that, we can tag in a message about what we're asking them to do. So yeah, you appreciate us, so don't put your bin out, or don't put your bin with this in your bin kind of message. So I think, and that message getting out there and actually sort of really pushing. So even the sort of clap for care workers that will be on at 8 o'clock this evening, that's being expanded, so it's bigger. And yeah, maybe we need a sort of bang your bin lid for bin men or whatever.
You should work in marketing, Trevor, with that kind of strapline.
No, so 6 o'clock in the morning, get out there and bang your bin. That's it. So
it's interesting. I had a conversation with people at CIWM last week about this, and we definitely think there is a need for a bin recycling waste related, clap or slap or bang or whatever phrase we come up with, because you're right, they are frontline. And actually, I think social media, I mean, I want to grab this positive vibe that's going around at the moment. The bin men have never been seen in such a positive light in all the time I've worked in the sector, and that's far too long, to be honest with you. And I think you're getting shout outs of, you're getting rainbows, and then you're getting letters written on bins, and you're getting thank you notes. I mean, if now is not the time to engage, I think Christy, you said this earlier, now is the time to engage, because people are so in tune with the same problem that we are, and they are so thankful that we've got frontline staff that are going out there and taking the right precautions to deliver that service. So I think social media could be a very powerful force right now if we harness the right messages and get the right straplines. So last 5 minutes, I'm in quick fire mode because it's quiz time. One sentence answers, please. Are you seeing a problem with side waste? Let's go, Ian, Trevor, Christy.
I'm glad you asked that then, because I was going to comment on that in terms of the last discussion. I'm not a collection authority, but I am picking up anecdotally evidence of some abuse of some bin collectors, bin men if you want to call them that, particularly in relation to side waste. So yes, there does appear to be more side waste out there, and I think authorities need to be quick to respond to that and understand how to deal with it, and how to manage those messages. But yes, I think I'm seeing it anecdotally, but it's not a direct area of my responsibility.
Trevor?
We're not actually seeing any more side waste on our residual. We're seeing our recycling up slightly, what sort of surprised us, because we expected our green to move in, our organic to move into our black, but we're not seeing that huge increase at the moment. That might just be we've got too much capacity in our black bin anyway, and we might need to reduce that frequency of collection. So what might be the good news coming out of this, but I'll leave that for next week.
Christy?
Not so much side waste, on the residual, but bags of waste left next to litter bins is becoming a problem for us. And
Yeah.
and maybe a question out there is, we are finding evidence in that waste, and normally we would have a zero tolerance approach and actually go all the way to court and things, but actually we're not really sure what to do in this scenario, so we're kind of working on our policy for that, because the temptation is to want to go and speak to them, but we can't go and knock on their door. You think maybe we'll write to them, so more around litter bin waste and household waste being left at litter bins than actual side waste.
You could just set up one of your covert teams in a bush near the litter bin in question, and when they're about to drop something in, you go, oh, surprise. Because I'm intrigued. I thought non-essential services, Ian, what are these people doing going out to litter bins?
Interesting. Can I ask a question, because I'm really interested to follow that up in terms of related to litter is dog waste. Now, people are walking their dogs a lot more than they're used to. A lot of dogs don't want to be walked anymore. They can't cope with it. But if authorities are considering or having issues with litter generally, is dog waste going to become a particular issue? Sorry to step in and ask questions in your place, but I'm interested in that one.
Trevor.
Yeah, we're already seeing that. Probably on our streets is our biggest push on dog waste. So we've basically told everybody, put it into the litter, and you take it home or put it into your litter bin next to it. So we were working on a program of trying to get rid of our dog waste bins and just have litter bins anyway, because it all ends up in the same place. So, but we suddenly had a load of parishes that didn't like that. So now we've accelerated that program. So that's quite good. So we've just done a year's work in about 2 emails on that one. So I think we are, the number of poor dogs out there that must be being walked to their legs are dropping off, but we are really struggling on emptying our dog waste bins quick enough.
Christy?
So we've actually prioritised litter and dog bin collections, and we've also put a poster on every dog bin and litter bin that we can, saying that we're not collecting them as frequent, and if they spot a problem, then to report it. So we're then getting those hotspots and being able to get back to them. So we're actually still continuing at the moment, but sort of preempted a sort of drop off in resource to focus on ones, because what we've traditionally thought of as being like the town centre bins that would need to be emptied more frequently, we think that will shift to more of the countryside. So we've actually got out, I think we've got 400 posters out in the last 2 weeks, and asking people to report a problem to try and tackle it that way, so at least we know where the issues are.
Last question then. 1+1, driver plus collector. Do you think we can roll that out as best practice across most of our authority areas, or are we going to get some kickback? Let's start with Christy, then Trevor, then Ian, and then I'll wrap up.
So from my perspective, no, we don't have enough vehicles to go out driver +1, and I'm not confident on the health and safety of them following around in other trucks and other vehicles and then jumping out and trying to catch up with the waste truck and everything. Our position will be where we can, we will, and that's what we'll try and keep to. And
how are you getting the social distancing to work? I mean, are they wearing more PPE? Are they just, not hugging each other in the cab? What are they doing?
So actually we're taking the stance of saying where we can social distance we will, but actually we're a frontline service, and we're focusing on keeping crews together, staggering times, but also saying if you do have that first symptom, then really that crew then needs to go home on self-isolation, and that's actually a bigger control measure than trying to get them into driver +1, and so we're taking that stance at the moment.
Thank you. Trevor?
We're on driver +1, but we're not doing, we've put a couple of extra vehicles or a few extra vehicles in to support those, so we can do that with a shutdown of our green. If we bring our green back up, we'll struggle. We don't believe that having another crew member that's dropped off or drives out to meet the crew will work, because once they get to the back end of the estate, they will just get in the cab and come back again with them. So we're doing all the social distancing measures in top of that, about separating crews, keeping crews together, separating workforces, including sort of additional hand washing and stuff like that. But I think we have moved to drive +1, and we had a number of conversations with the unions about what was appropriate, what wasn't appropriate. So we've been trying to work with our major union we've got, is GMB, but trying to work in a pragmatic way with them and trying to share best practice about what's out there. But there is so much different. I've got some neighbouring authorities that haven't been hit so far hard with COVID-19 at the moment, who are still driver +2, that drive through my district to get some of their collection points. what's really quite frustration. So it is around this, it's trying to have a national agreement on this, but knowing that every district, every council is different, and we're all being hit differently, and that's gonna change as we move through this process as well.
Last word to Ian.
It's a really interesting discussion. I think driver plus one makes eminent sense. It's an appropriate response. It's clearly got operational challenges attached to it. But what I'm not hearing is whether it's universal, whether it's only applicable in certain circumstances. And there's this sort of argument that says, yeah, we are providing a key service. One of your competitors was on Radio 4 at the weekend, I think, talking about comparing driver plus one and social distancing in refuse collection with the health service. And I think you can perhaps do that when it comes to public health issues around residual waste. I think that's harder to justify on something like green waste. And so I'd be interested in that comparison. Is it always going to be applicable? That we might have to justify. We can't get away with driver plus one for certain reasons, but do we have to accept that maybe on other services, really, it's the only appropriate response?
Fantastic. You've all been awesome. The audience have stayed with us, even though I'm now 2 minutes after my deadline for finishing, so apologies. Insights have been great. I think what this suggests to me is we've still got a long way to go. There's still some lessons to be learned. There's plenty of lessons to share. There's some still grey areas we need to work out the answers, and there's probably some lobbying to be done with government to make sure we don't make some wrong decisions soon and pay for them later. So all I can ask is that those of you that have dialed in and listened to us, hopefully we've got all your questions answered. If you're uncertain, come back to us, Suez, come back to your peers, Adept, Nordo, Larac, etc. We're always happy to share. CIWM, of course. Thank you to my expert panel. It's been an absolute pleasure today. I know you're all very busy with operational services. I am the odd one out. But thank you very much for your time. I look forward to taking back some of these messages to DEFRA over the next couple of days. So good luck with the services, good luck with the service changes, and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Have you started?